I chose to do my presentation on the person's case and the Famous Five. In this presentation, I will explain who the Famous Five were and what they stood for, as well as everything you need to know about the person's case. I will also explain the progresses and declines of this event and how it helped to shape Canada into the place it is today. In 1927, 5 Albertan women got together to forever change the lives of Canadian women. The British North America Act from 1867 stated that only qualified persons could be appointed to Canadian Senate. The Canadian government at the time suggested that this meant only men could be appointed senator. This, of course, outraged and humiliated women everywhere. As humans, we are made of the same atoms. We come from the same place. We are all people. If women were not people, how could the men that come from a womb be any more than us? As well, isn't it strange that women had had the right to vote for almost 10 years at this point, yet they didn't have the right to be a part of what they were voting for? 5 women in particular took a stand against this bias, and their cause became known as the Persons Case. The Famous Five included Emily Murphy, Henrietta Edwards, Nellie McClung, Louise McKinney, and Irene Parlby. Emily Murphy led the group, and having needed 4 more women to be able to approach the Supreme Courts with her issue, she gathered the 4 most intelligent and determined women activists she could find to help her out. Emily Murphy was a Canadian equal rights activist. She was Canada's first female magistrate and helped end discriminatory legislation against women. As well, she served as a member of Congress and as a judge starting in late 1929, when women had officially been documented people. Henrietta Edwards was a women's rights activist, a reformer, and an artist. She spent her life fighting for women's rights and education. As well, she founded a large number of movements, societies, and organizations aimed at improving the lives of women in Canada. Nellie McClung was a women's rights activist, a legislator, and an author. She supported the feminist cause of her era and fought for the economic independence of women in Canada. More recently, feminists have criticized her approval of eugenics, as she publicly supported the sterilization of mental defectives. Louise McKinney was a women's rights activist, Methodist, and preacher. She holds the title of being the first woman elected to a legislature in Canada and in the British Empire. As well, she dedicated her life to the goods and services of others. Irene Parlby was a women's rights advocate and activist. She was a member of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta for 14 years and was the first woman in Alberta to be appointed to a cabinet position. Women became considered people on October 18, 1929. Women have not yet been people for even 100 years, but despite this, women officially being persons was a huge step forward for women's rights everywhere. Now that women are recognized as people by the Canadian government, they are eligible to be a member of legislature or Congress, as well as having the opportunity to be appointed to Senate. This breakthrough opened a whole new set of doors, as well as a sense of hope for women everywhere. A few examples of progress for women and Canada include Bertha Wilson, Jean Save, and Audrey McLaughlin. In 1982, Bertha Wilson became the first woman justice of the Supreme Court of Canada and had a large influence on the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. As well, she is remembered for her part in overturning restrictions on abortion in 1988. Jean Save was Canada's first Canadian woman Governor-General and the first woman Speaker of the House of Commons. Lastly, Audrey McLaughlin became the first woman leader of a federal Canadian political party, the NDP, in the Yukon. Had the Persons Case not occurred, none of these women would have been able to achieve such greatness. As far as a result of declines for Canada because of the Persons Case, I struggled to find any. Women and men were officially equal. The only side I could see negativity in for men was the fact that now men had more competition for a spot in a government position, but there will always be multiple people running for political positions regardless of gender. As a result of the Persons Case of 1929, women in Canada have become empowered, successful individuals. Gender no longer limits anyone from achieving their goals, and women are seen as respected, intelligent people in all areas of government and everyday life.